Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Gina Blum. I am Executive Director of Staying Put in New Canaan, and I'm excited to have you all here tonight. I want to thank our partners, the New Canaan Library, for hosting our event this evening, and also the New Canaan Community Foundation for generously supporting our efforts and allowing us to serve as a community resource on healthy aging. So Staying Put in New Canaan is a nonprofit organization that helps older adults in town live confidently and remain engaged in the community. We do this by providing practical services and also meaningful social connections. So please consider joining, supporting, or volunteering, or all three. I'm delighted to introduce our guest speaker this evening, Janet Simpson Benvenuti. I've had the pleasure of working with her over the past year as we've been planning this program and getting to know her. She is the founder of Circle of Life Partners and author of Don't Give Up on Me, Supporting Aging Parents Successfully, which I hope you all will find as helpful and insightful as I did. And there are complimentary copies in the back of the room for you. Janet has over 20 years of experience. She has dedicated tens of thousands of clinical and business, I'm so sorry, I didn't bring my glasses up, and so I'm having a hard time reading this part of it, but over the past 20 years, Janet has educated tens of thousands of clinical and business leaders, coached hundreds of families, and advised dozens of startups, becoming one of the nation's leading advocates for families navigating aging. A frequent keynote speaker, Janet brings a rare blend of expertise and empathy, shaped by her background as a scientist and pharmaceutical executive, and by her own personal experience balancing career life, parents in declining health, and young children. Her insights are practical, compassionate, and deeply relatable, and I'm delighted to have you join us this evening for this special event. Please welcome Janet.
Thank you. So we'll see if this works. Hang on one second.
Put your PowerPoint on.
Oh, she's going to put my PowerPoint on.
Yeah.
That will help.
Then it will work.
I told them I needed to roam around the stage, so that way if I catch anyone nodding off, this is a conversation, this is not a lecture, so we're going to have lots of fun tonight. This is actually my third visit to New Canaan. It's one of my favorite towns to visit. I came here in 2014 and spoke at the Presbyterian Church. We had an event like this. Then I came back in 2019 and facilitated a conversation at Waveney, and here I am again. So I am like that relative you cannot get rid of. I keep showing up. And for some reason, this continues to be a topic that resonates with so many of us. Tonight, we're going to cover just one issue, one question, which is how. How do we successfully support the lives of our parents and in-laws? How do we do that if we're the adult children without derailing our careers, without damaging our own health, and without depleting the family's assets unnecessarily? And for some of us, I'm still caring for an aging parent, but some of us are at an age where we're now starting to plan for our own longevity. And so what are those vital few decisions that we need to focus on, separated from the trivial many? So I'm curious tonight, how many of you are in the thick of supporting an aging relative? Let's see, great. And how many of you are here because you're thinking about your own longevity and you want to get some ideas and conversations? And the rest of you just needed a night out? Is that what? Let's see what expertise is in the room. How many of you are involved in healthcare in some capacity? Physician, nurse, physical therapist, occupational therapist? Okay, look around. These are your neighbors. How many of you are in the financial world? Do you help people plan for retirement? So you can raise your hands. You know, this could be for business. You never know. Attorneys? Any elder law attorneys? Okay, great. This will be a conversation in a bit. This part of the program is being recorded. So sometimes people take notes, and then you'll be able to go back and re-listen to this first half of the conversation. And then the video recording will be stopped. So we'll be able to have a conversation. I don't think anyone wants to see their families situation on YouTube. So we need a definition of aging. So let's start with this one. It's fairly simple. Aging is the process of growing old. Let's start with growing old. At what chronological age does your body begin to age? Is it really 60 or 65? What do you think? Throw out a number. 40? 25? She's close. She must be a biology major. It's 28 or 29. So you are a great-looking group, but we are all on this aging continuum. The other thing to focus on is it's a process. I'm not going to turn into a 95-year-old frail woman tomorrow. And that process allows us to spend some time proactively making decisions to plan for our own longevity. So I happen to like road trips. I just drove 140 miles to come here. Take a look at this woman on the left in the teal sweater. She looks to be in her late 50s, maybe early 60s. She's making cupcakes with her granddaughter and daughter. She's fit. Maybe she's retiring, picking up some volunteer work, serving on boards, traveling, has a book club. The fact is, though, no matter how many Pilates classes she takes, and no matter how many blueberries she eats, she is still going to transition to the woman on the right. There she is again with her daughter. Some people call this change a change from the young old to the old old. Instead, I want you to think about it as a transition from being fully independent to being dependent or interdependent on others. Do any of you have children? Just nod, yes. You've seen babies, right? They lie in a crib, they're completely useless. They can't feed themselves, they can't handle their hygiene, they can't communicate other than crying. And yet somehow over the next 18, 21, 25 years, they become a fully independent adult. Well, the last 25 years of life can be the mirror opposite of that, as people transition back toward needing support from others. Does that make sense to you? Yes? Okay. Now, I spend a lot of time with clinicians, and I know people will say to me, yes, Jan, that's great, I get this, but we can't predict how we're going to age, right? Well, factually, that's not true. We know the number one killer of all people is heart disease. And the number one cause of heart disease, by the way, is not smoking. It's actually chronic stress. The second leading cause of death is cancer. The third leading cause of death pre-COVID was preventable medical mistakes. So when I tell you to keep your loved ones out of the hospital, make sure their stays are short, there's a reason for that. There's also, clinicians will tell you that the aging process is actually very predictable. Let me show you what I mean. Here we go. They have a category called instrumental activities of daily living. I would call them independent activities of daily living. These are the skills that we learned as children and teenagers. We learned how to transport ourselves places, to walk, to run, ride a bicycle, take public transportation, drive. Some people fly planes. We learned about money, how to make it, how to spend it, how to invest it. We can prepare meals for ourselves. I married the cook in the family. If he were sitting here, he'd tell you he cooks in self-defense, which is true. I make reservations for dinner, but we can maintain our homes, our cars. We have the ability to communicate. And if your physician says take this medication in the morning and another at night, you'd be able to comply with that. So in a naturally aging person, these are the skills that start to change first. You'll hear people mention they don't drive at night anymore. They may need cataracts, surgery, but this is where services like Staying Put come in are so helpful. You may visit a parent who lives in a neighboring state, and you'll notice that the food in the refrigerator is spoiled, the house is untidy, finances seem to be having trouble filing for taxes. So I put this here especially for adult children, because they always ask, well, when do I start to pay attention? When do I start the process of supporting a parent? One executive called from California, and he said, I'm visiting my parents in Florida. They're doing great. They're in their 80s. My rule in the sand, if someone's over the age of 80, you need to be paying attention. If you have not, because things will change very quickly. So I got his siblings on the phone because, I've found over the years that one sibling does not know everything that's going on, and parents lie. They lie to their children. They say, oh, no, everything's fine. No, I'm fine. So he was telling me, oh, my dad plays tennis a couple of times a week. Everything's great. So we get the gang on the phone, and one of his sisters says, I'm not getting in the car with Dad. He's going to kill Mom. He's been in 2 car accidents in the last few months. That's a flag that something is changing. So this is what will change first. And then over time, people will need assistance with what's called activities of daily living. There are 6 of them. Do we have any insurance folks here? Long-term care insurance. People purchase that. When someone needs help with 2 or more of these activities of daily living. So these are the skills we did this morning without thinking about it. You transferred out of bed. You handled your hygiene. You walked into this room, and you're able to feed yourself. This is not about preparing food. This is actually about being able to pick up a spoon and eat ice cream. These are the changes that will happen in a naturally occurring and naturally aging person. Now, nobody likes this slide. Nobody. Talk about retirement planning and longevity planning, where you're going to live, what new hobbies you're going to take up. This is what you're planning for. It truly is a circle of life, and we will all experience this transition. Oh, there's not a sound in the room. So the question then becomes, if that's our reality, what do we do about it? And in a minute, I'm going to share with you the 8 strategic issues that you need to focus on. I didn't mention my own story in this case. It occurred just like everyone else. I got one phone call from my father asking for help. He had learned that morning that a pain in his side that he thought was pneumonia was actually lung cancer, stage 4. And he called to see if I would help my mother out. He just got the death sentence, but would you help your mother paying bills and such? And I said, well, of course. He had called his attorney, and it wasn't until a few months later that I actually read the documents. Some of you have seen them. I didn't realize I was now legally responsible for a 78-year-old living with cancer, a 77-year-old living with heart disease and dementia, a 6-year-old, a 4-year-old, a full-time job, a husband who traveled Monday through Friday. We had just finished building our house. It took 12 years for me to get drapes in the living room. And so when I got into my 40s, my friends started asking for help. And they did not ask the what questions. They asked the how questions. How did you get the car keys away from your mother? How did you find home care? How did you pay for home care? Because they were people of modest means. I'm the first generation to go to college in my family. And so I went looking for a book to be able to hand people and say, well, this is what it really looks like. I couldn't find it, so I wrote it. And I wrote a list of 50 things I wish I had known before I started down this journey with my parents. There were legal issues, financial issues, housing issues, the whole sibling dynamic. I'm the youngest of 5. I always envy only children when they start saying, oh, it's so much work. I thought, oh, welcome to my family. It was more fun negotiating with them sometimes. So I published this book. It's been reprinted many, many times. It is not a memoir. It's a case study. Cases are used in medical school to teach holistic decision-making. They're used in business schools for the same reason. So the first third of the book, my parents are alive. The opening scene, my father's dying in his living room. I had 45 minutes to go before I had to pick up my 5-year-old from kindergarten. My mother was upstairs wandering around, making the beds or doing something, because when she got stressed, she did other things. And so my father wanted me to drive him to the hospital because if he called 911, he wouldn't go to his hospital. So that's the opening scene. Why? Because I want you to see the reality quickly. It's written in the first person, so you're not going to know what's coming next. And that was very intentional. The first third of the book, we sort of set the stage. My father dies. The middle, I stop, give some advice. This middle section, one sister and I said, well, we'll keep Mom at home if we can. My sister said, well, she can live with me. She has 4 daughters. 3 were teenage girls at the time. Do I need to say anything else? 1 bathroom, 2 dogs, a ferret, 2 working parents. Well, that makes sense. So my mother moved in with them, and we built an addition onto that house, and she stayed there until the end of her life. But you see the chaos. Meanwhile, my mother picks up an infectious disease. Does anyone know what Clostridium difficile is? You should. And then I break the story again and give you some more ideas on what to pay attention to, and then the last part of the book, I take you into their end-of-life scenarios, because I thought physicians handled that. They don't. And so the reason I published this book was to try to help people understand one case start to finish. Each of you is another case. And when you talk to your friends and you start hearing what decisions they're making, you'll start to see patterns. Oh, maybe this parent had dementia, but this one has macular degeneration, right? There's some unique aspects to every aging process, but there are some commonalities. And so here, we're going to cover, these are the 8 strategic issues that need your attention. So there are only 8. Let's look at the woman on the left again, right? The one in the teal sweater. We know that she's going to have a great time, but she's anticipating the future. We know what her sequence of events will be. She's going to begin to see changes in herself regarding those instrumental activities of daily living, and then eventually she will need help with activities of daily living. So in anticipation of all of that, let me zip through these 8 areas, explain what they are, and then most of the conversation we have tonight will likely center around these specific issues. So the first thing that has to be done, and this is no specific order, most attorneys take care of, wills and trusts and that, but the 2 most important decisions to make, who is going to oversee your wealth, pay the bills, file taxes, and who is going to oversee your health legally. Not just as a friend, not as a child, but legally. My father signed documents, and others, you have done the same, that appoint a durable power of attorney, right? So I could pay their bills, handle their taxes, sell their house, and because it was durable, I could do that without their permission if they lost their cognitive abilities. I became their healthcare agent. Different states call it different things. There are medical powers of attorney. So if they lost the capacity to give what's called informed consent, then I would step in, just as I do with my children, right? Make medical decisions for that. So one of the most important things I ask families when they ask for help is, well, what did your parents set up legally? Who's in charge, essentially? So even though I have 4 siblings, I was the one who made the decisions about end-of-life issues. We had discussions, lots of debate, but it fell on me just as it would as a parent. On the financial side, people will spend money or waste it in 4 areas. There's medical expenses. A couple who's 65 will need about $425,000 to cover all medical expenses through the end of their lives. People spend money on housing. wherever they live, and people will spend money on long-term care. And long-term care is having help in the house, when you need help with activities of daily living. It's paying for services. Services that used to be provided by family members. But about 20% of baby boomers are aging without any family. So that's why community-based solutions like staying put, are really needed. The medical system, you'll notice that I separated the medical system from health, right? We have the system, doctors, etc. People need to understand how to navigate the medical system. And there are 3 suggestions I have. The first is every older person needs an advocate. I was my parents' healthcare agent. I was no longer their daughter. A daughter visits a parent in the hospital and brings magazines, chats about the kids, maybe a little snack. An advocate calls the doctor ahead of time to find out what's going on, brings an update of the drugs they're taking and any allergies to the nurse's station. Never assume the system has accurate information. I usually visited around, because I work flexibly, around lunchtime or dinner to make sure they were eating. And the advocate also asks to meet with the social worker who's going to handle discharge. Where are they going? When are they going to be discharged, right? So it's a different role. And just as I wouldn't have sent my 8-year-old into the hospital by himself when he had an asthmatic attack, I certainly wouldn't want my 83-year-old mother in the hospital alone. This is hard to hear, but it's necessary. I am a pharmaceutical. I had experience in the pharmaceutical business. I am a scientist by training, nuclear chemist. It's a genetic defect. But I did work in, I understand drugs. You don't have to. But when you look at the drug profile, how many drugs are people taking? 20 pills a day. You're taking pills to offset the side effects of other pills. Well, how do you wrap your hands around that? This is, aside from the legal, who's in charge, suggestion, this is the second most important thing to do, is to get a handle on the prescription drugs. Every drug has side effects. Everyone. So what you want to do is draw up a list of the drugs, the dosing, and the time of day taken. Then take that to a pharmacist. Go to CVS, Walgreens. Hand them the list and ask them, what do you think? Are there any issues here? I have a niece caring for my brother now who uses ChatGPT to do this. So you can do that too. But again, and then take the list of questions to the doctors. Most geriatricians, physicians who treat older folks, they spend a lot of their time de-prescribing medication. So it's important to realize. And then the third thing about the healthcare system is to practice slow medicine. Now, a cardiologist in Italy, actually, came up with this phrase of slow medicine. We all have an expiration date. And as someone gets further along, in my father's case, you'll see, stage 4 lung cancer, he had the diseased lung removed, but we did not give him any follow-up chemo or radiation. I had checked into the data, and it didn't matter. His life expectancy was a year. So we focused on what does matter, and I'll show you a slide on that. Good nutrition. I'm half Irish, so we find everything funny. The funniest story in my family is a sister-in-law had a stroke in a restaurant. Trust me, my husband thinks there's something wrong with my family, but you'll get it if you go to an Irish wake. You'll understand that tragedy always turns into a great story. So understand this notion of slow medicine. You never withhold care, but you might want to withhold treatment. Housing. The good news is there are only 4 choices. People are going to age in place with staying put, or they are going to consider moving to an assisted living community choose one that has a memory unit, or people go to a continual care retirement community like Waveney, Or folks stay at home and then sort of very end of life, they may go to a skilled nursing home. That's it. Those are the choices. There are different economics tied to each one of them. Geography matters. That's the physical distance between you and the person you're supporting. I relocated my family 300 miles north to live 5 miles from my parents. Many people relocate their parents closer to them. One colleague of mine lives north of Boston. Her parents retired to Cape Cod. A lot of people do that. She found the 2 hours each way going to help her parents just impossible with a full-time job and 2 children, right? So this physical distance matters, and I get lots of questions, especially from young executives who, I'm living in London, my parents live in Southern California, how do I do this? And you'll see in the resource list that I have all kinds of options for folks. We'll get to that. Siblings are a blessing or a curse, but they form the nucleus of a support system. The basic strategy here is you want to build a support system around the aging parent and around the person I call the designated child. That son or daughter, niece or nephew who gets the call at midnight and ends up dropping everything and running to the hospital, that's the designated child. And if that is you and you think because you are so successful in your day job that you don't need support, you are completely wrong. That was the hardest issue for me to realize, oh, you can't do this. It's impossible. You need a network of support. I'm in front of a lot of executives from time to time. I love calling them out on this because they're the worst ones. They just think they can do it themselves. You cannot. So that's a key strategy. There's a little handout at the back. I prepared, I'm Switzerland. I curate resources all the time. I have no financial relationship with any of them. But I have on this a podcast that I did with a friend of mine, Carol Cohen. And in that, I actually described how to build a network of support, starting with family members in the family tree. So it's at the back. My cell phone is at the top. I only give that out to people who see me in action. You can text me and I'll send you the digital version of this. And I don't keep your information, but it's front and back, and you may find this particularly useful. Health and caregiving, we're going to get to that in a little bit. And then end-of-life planning. They actually call this advanced care planning. There's a 5 wishes document at the back. I noticed that. Again, on this resource list, you'll see I noted Being Mortal, which is a book that was published several years ago now by a surgeon named Atul Gawande. Right? He described how his journey with his own dad went, and he talked about hospice care and so forth. Take a look at that if you haven't read it. There's a book I also noted called I'll Have It My Way, which is a very funny book, but very thoughtful, written by a woman about creating her living will, her instructions to that person who's the healthcare agent. And in her case, that person was not her husband, because she knew he wouldn't do what she wanted. And so her living will is great, and it's to the point. It's worth the book. And then there was a journalist in Boston, actually, Ellen Goodman, who was caring for her sister who had cancer, and she created something called the Conversation Project, and that is guidance to help people have end-of-life conversations. And so again, that's all on here, and you can literally click through to find it. So I'm going to stop here for a minute. I think it's time for you to talk. So why don't we open it up? I think we have a microphone, a roving mic. And if you have nothing to say, oh, don't worry, I have plenty to say. So we'll continue. But why don't we take a break for a minute and see what you all would like to talk about?
Just raise your hand and I'll come to you with the mic. If you have a question or...
You talk about the concept of someone to help you with your financial matters, your legal matters, and your health. Do you recommend that that's the same person? Separate that out amongst siblings? What's your experience or thoughts on that?
When I meet with a family of siblings, I chat with them, as you can tell I'm chatty, and I ask them what they do for a living. And so I'm not just chatting with them, I'm actually trying to figure out what skills exist in this family. So if someone is a banker or works as an accountant, maybe that's the person who should be paying the bills. If someone works in healthcare and has healthcare related, maybe that's the right person. I joke that we put my mother with my sister with this chaotic environment. God bless the two of them. Both of them have experience with people who have mental health issues. So while my mother stressed me out, they didn't seem bothered by it at all. So usually you try to match the skills with what people can do. Proximity is part of the decision. It is good if you can separate it. You know, my husband is a financial guy. He pays his mother's bills. She's 100, by the way, this year. And his brother's a doctor. So there it was. That was easy. My family was a little more complicated, which is why I got both responsibilities. But usually, most families, they usually divide that out if they can. What else?
Overall strategy on the difficult conversations about the car keys and other safety-related issues with a stubborn parent.
With a stubborn parent. Okay. So how do you overcome resistance? We'll cover that first. And then strategies with the car keys will follow. Okay. How do you overcome resistance? The first thing, and you've done it, is to identify the one thing that really matters. So if trying to get someone to stop driving, if that's a real priority right now, then that's what has to be focused on. What I've seen in some families is a son will come, he's got his list of things, Dad, we need to do this, Mom, you need to do that, you know, this is laundry list. Focusing on the most significant thing is important. The second is thinking about your family. Who influences your father? It might not be you. This is a hard thing to realize, but it's the influencer who can get a stubborn person to change sometimes. So it could be an adult child. It could be the sibling of the parent. It could be a faith leader. It could be a golfing buddy. But someone influences a stubborn person. And the third strategy I recommend is that you give people options. You're not taking away his car keys. You're figuring out how is he going to get places. So before you even think to make some kind of significant change, you have to really think through, well, he's now going to be stuck in the house without the ability to go places. And that's, you know, that can lead to loneliness and all kinds of issues. So these kinds of issues of resistance can't be solved overnight, but really takes some thinking. Who's going to influence the change? What are the options? Car keys are one of the most difficult. There are videos. You can go to the Alzheimer's Association website. They have videos on how to have a conversation about taking the car keys away. Don't do that until you've figured out how they're going to get places. Then some people disable the cars. Some people take the car to the shop. I mean, there are all kinds of strategies, and it never comes back from the shop, right? But the basic issue is, it's a serious issue, it's a safety issue. And you should know, if you have a parent who has dementia and they're in a car accident, guess who's liable if there's a lawsuit? It's not an insignificant issue. My mother kept her license, and she just didn't drive because everybody started driving her places. And then she got out of the habit of driving, and then she would say, I never should have given up my license. She didn't give it up. She still had it. But we created this sort of infrastructure around her one of my neighbors kept running over her mailbox. So again, she had her kids finally persuaded her to stop driving, but she went out every day to the senior center in town. A van picked her up. She was a widow. She used to take two 90-year-olds, she was in her 80s, to the movies once a week. The family hired a woman to come pick up her and her girlfriends to take her to the movies. They hired someone to go take her grocery shopping and to get her hair done. So they created a system around the mom, so she wasn't isolated. But safety issues are not, I don't compromise on that. I had a woman, I talk all the time to folks, and someone started venting at a cocktail party with me because her dad kept falling in the shower, right? And it was serious. So she found a contractor. The contractor was going to install grab bars, and she was going to pay for it. And she was venting because he showed up at the house, and her dad would not let him put the grab bars up. She was furious, right? And of course, she didn't expect my response because I started laughing. And because it reminded me of my own father. He had throat cancer at 72. He had bypass surgery at 76. He had lung cancer at 78. He was a man with 9 lives. But after his heart surgery, I said to him, "Dad, you cannot stand in the shower." Now, I'm the influencer. And most of the time, you see the Canadian side of me, the friendly person. But there is this Scots-Irish side. So, there is a side that gets serious about safety issues. So I said, so you have 3 choices. You see, I'm giving him the agency. Here are your 3 choices. We can get a new tub put in. My brother-in-law is a contractor. It could be done. The kind that has a door that you step in, one of those. Or we could put grab bars on the tile. Or you can get one of those seats that's half in and half out of the tub, with one of those nozzle extensions. What would you like to do? Standing in the shower was not an option. Now, he chose the seat. I would have chosen the grab bars. I don't know, guys, what's wrong with grab bars in the bathroom, but there's clearly an issue there. Maybe it's gender related, or maybe it's a concern that the tiles are going to break. But by giving someone choices, you're still giving them the agency to make decisions, as they always have. You're just narrowing it down a little bit. But when it comes to safety, you really can't compromise on that. Thank you. That's a great question. There are so many memories tied to every item in the house. But you're right. When it comes to a safety issue, which it sounds like, 40% of hospitalizations are caused by falls. So you really do want to set your parents up. So even though your tactics might have been a little hardcore, it's working.
I was born and raised in the Bronx, so
I got it.
Kind of hardcore in a way.
I married
And now
a guy
I live
from
here and I'm
Queens,
nice
so
and
I
soft,
understand.
and I'm not tough anymore. So.
Whatever works. And it's done out of love. I mean, this is all done out of love. You want your parents to live as well as possible. So, yes, tactics sometimes can be tough love, but you got it done, which is important.
We're in the thick of it at my house. Dad died in January. Mom's got dementia. 1 brother in LA, 1 brother in Annapolis. Mom's in Stamford. I'm in Westport. And my teenage daughter has moved in to cook and watch the aides and all of that. Well, that's a short window. She's got to get on with her life. And, the sibling dynamic, the brothers are all trying to be in charge of her in ways that she's never experienced. And, so it's taking a lot out of all of us. I feel like keeping her in the house for a whole lot longer is out of guilt from the brother who's farthest away, and that we could probably move her into a memory care situation, but it's our first rodeo. How do we know when, what, how? How do we set the boundary for when it's taking too much out of our hides? You started this with how not to end ourselves in the process. Tell us how.
There are professionals who focus on helping families navigate this stage. When you look at this handout, you'll see there are professional care managers. Most of them are nurses or social workers. When a family gets really stuck, it's useful to even ask for a consultation with someone. There's a website, you type in the zip code, you get someone, but these are folks who can literally work with the family to help assess your mother, see if it's okay for her to be there. And sometimes in some families, when someone comes in from the outside, and nurses, I usually suggest that people use nurses, especially if you're dealing with dementia. For some reason, most older people really relate to nurses. You know, they're not uncomfortable with nurses. So they could come in and do an assessment for you. They could report back to all of you. And then it isn't your decision. It's a decision, it's advice from an expert. So that might be something to consider in this mix. Some folks will say, well, have a family meeting. Okay, that works in some families, but not every family. You know, and I always refer people, especially when there's a lot of geographic distance, I always suggest that people consider using a professional care manager. You know, they're very experienced at this. A lot of them have therapy training and so forth, and they can really help with the family dynamic. I also recommend often for some folks to use a therapist. There's a lot of baggage. I talk about having, and I had a loving relationship with my parents. That is not always the case. And so this could be the first time in your life where you work with a therapist. But I think, am I getting?
We lost your slideshow, so I'm trying to get it back.
Oh, that's okay. No worries. But that's what I might consider in that particular situation. What else? Yes.
The issue of respect, I find that when I'm speaking with my mom about the car in particular, and she actually did verbalize, losing independence, you know. So I don't want to just throw that away because she's still there enough to sense her own independence, and I want to show her that respect, that she deserves the independence. I think what you said about planning other things, or here's how we'll get you from here to there, but outside of driving and beyond, if you could talk about that, just always, you know, being respectful.
I think that managing your temperature. Now we get to all of that. If you find yourself getting angry, you need a break. My clue for myself is if I lost my sense of humor, I knew I needed a break, right? So if you find your parent is aggravating you and you're sharp, it's not them and it's not you, it's just the situation. And you both need to take a half a step back. I do believe very strongly in exactly what you said, that we treat our loved ones with respect. But this is hard work. This is a lot of work. And if someone has cognitive challenges, they're not even aware of how much work it is, right? And so self-monitoring is good. There's no guilt here. We're all doing the best we can, right? But that was my clue to myself, that it was just getting to be too much. I'm getting a signal, so we have about 5 more minutes, but I do want to get a couple more comments.
Hi.
Hi.
Does Medicare ever provide for someone to come in and help someone who may have issues organizing medication, doctor's visits, just getting their act together? One of my parents is young, in early 70s with Parkinson's. My dad's pushing 90, and he has just aging memory issues, and they're just not the same as a year ago?
The short answer is yes. And especially if they're housebound, then, and they can be housebound to qualify for in-home care. So we would need a longer conversation, but yes, Medicare will help cover someone to come to the house and assist, especially with a diagnosis like of Parkinson's, a diagnosis of osteoporosis. You can get support. Now, how do you find out here in New Canaan where to get guidance on that? Staying put, folks. Do you have people who understand Medicare and all its complexity? They do. So call Staying Put. They'll help you with that. That's an excellent question.
Connecticut. They can. It's
yes.
nationally the same.
It's
Depends
nationally
on
the
the
same.
state.
That's absolutely correct. And I assume they have regular Medicare, not Medicare Advantage programs, because that's a whole nother ball of wax. But here's the thing, you can call Staying Put here and get advice and apply it in a different place. The councils on aging across the country, there are 11,000 of them. I called my local council on aging. My mother did not live in my town. And I wasn't even over the age of 60 at the time. I was 38. And I said, I have no idea what I'm doing. And they had all kinds of information. So the important part of all of this is that you know you're not alone and know that you're not the first person to be dealing with whatever you're dealing with. And so the trick is to find a network of people who can advise you. Now, I do let me get to a fun topic for a minute, which is your health. I work on the clinical side also, and there is a new discipline within the medical field called lifestyle medicine. Several years ago, there was a young doctor at MD Anderson. He was studying brain tumors, and he hopped on the scanner to get a baseline of his own brain and discovered he had the very tumor that he was studying. He was 32. So he went through the treatment, and then they sent him home. And that was it. And he said, that's it. I have no guidance on here's what you should do, shouldn't do that could prevent a relapse. So he was a great researcher. He wound up, long story short, writing this book called Anti-Cancer. It is one of my favorite books. His name is Dr. Savan Schreiber. He lived for 20 years, but what is in this book, he described, talked about foods, talked about herbs and that, talked about pesticides, cell phone usage. It's one of the best books about cancer prevention, but he did something even better than that. He got MD Anderson to fund a clinical trial looking at what they call lifestyle medicine today, the factors that influence and can prevent relapse for cancer, and they were studying women who had been treated for breast cancer. Now, this is now a discipline within medical schools. Stanford has one of the best programs that focuses on longevity, so you can Google them, and they have all kinds of research and all kinds of information, but this is what's going to enable you to live longer and healthier. You need to move. I'm wearing an Apple Watch. We count our steps. And when you're older, do some strength training a couple of times a week so you don't lose body mass. We know what we should be eating. My mother-in-law was raised in northern Italy. You know the Mediterranean diet. You've heard of that. She's proof positive. She turns 100 this year. Restorative sleep. Sleep is what clears out the buildup of protein in your brain that can lead to dementia. Stress management. I'm sure I've stressed you a little bit tonight, so do whatever you need to relax. Social connection matters. Loneliness is a risk factor for depression. Depression leads to heart disease, and you know heart disease is the #1 killer. So cognitive enhancement. You know, people do crossword puzzles. That's all great, but learn something new. You've heard about AI? Go learn about it. You want to speak Spanish? Start studying Spanish. What you're doing is building what they call synaptic capacity. So we have billions of neurons in our brain, and at the very end, it's like my hair, there's a little synapse, and so the signal travels. What happens with dementia or Alzheimer's, there's a buildup of a little plaque. Think of it like a piece of gum in your hair, so that the signal can't cross. And then that little piece of gum leads to tangles, and then that leads to full inflammation of the brain. And so what you want to do is have lots of neurons. And learning something new, they've discovered neuroplasticity. Your brain can actually enhance itself. And then living with gratitude and purpose. I think my father's life expectancy was a year. He lived for 2.5 years. And I think it's because, unknown to us, we were doing all of these things. And giving him a reason to get up in the morning and have fun. And I know we have family members who come in with a cloud over our heads. They shouldn't be visiting. Send them home. Make sure your parents can laugh and enjoy life and listen to music, because all of that creates a positive energy that helps people live long, healthy lives. I want to tell you about a neighbor, Catherine Etsy. She raised 4 children, and in her 50s, she got her doctorate. So she became a therapist. In her 80s, she looked around and she said, well, there are no books about 80-year-olds written by 80-year-olds. So she wrote one. It's called 80-somethings. She gives advice to people who are 80 about what you should be thinking about, and she gives advice to those of us who interact with 80-year-olds how best to help them and support them. She writes a monthly column. I live in Concord, Massachusetts. We have an actual newspaper. It goes to every household on Fridays. She writes a monthly column about aging topics. She's now 91, by the way. And last year, very sadly, 4 high school students were on spring break in Florida in a car accident. 3 of the 4 were killed a few weeks before they were to graduate. The editor called Catherine and asked her if she could write a column on grief. They died on a Wednesday. This newspaper was going to everyone on Friday. I have saved that column. It was a column only someone in their 80s and 90s could write. It was so thoughtful. She is a therapist, of course, but it was amazing. She has continued to find her purpose, right? Now, we all can't be the Catherine Etsys of the world, but we can help our parents stay engaged in whatever capacity they have. I always, though, give my mother-in-law the last word, and here she is. She is celebrating her birthday. You will notice the cake, it's chocolate ganache. The champagne bottle is over here. And the center of that cake is a question mark. You see, her tip to all of you of how to reach the age of 100, she's 98 here, is you never tell people your age. And she didn't. And her cake has a question mark for a reason. So my hope for all of you is that you can create this kind of environment for yourselves and for your parents. I want to thank Staying Put for inviting me here tonight. It's been great. You have a fabulous audience. Please pick up both the copy of the book and also the list of resources there. So, and if you think of something, you can always text me a quick question if you want to. So, thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. I hope you found this insightful. Please do pick up some information in the back. And if you have any questions, please call Staying Put. We are a resource for the community. Thank you.